Hello, we're Scott and Mary Flanders from Nordhavn 46 Egret. We're here to tell you about Egret's travels in 9.5 years of full-time liveaboard and a recent circumnavigation. Mary and I took delivery of Egret August 6, 2001. We were liveaboard, still working, for 6 months. August 2nd, 2002, we left for the rest of our lives. We'd done weekend cruises, but that was all. We left Fort Lauderdale, went offshore to St. Mary's Inlet. That was our first offshore passage ever, first overnighters, which is at the Florida-Georgia border. We went up the intercoastal to the Chesapeake, back down to the Bahamas for the winter, back to Fort Lauderdale, the offshore trip to Nantucket, to Nova Scotia as far north as Halifax, back to Maine, back to the Bahamas. From the Bahamas to the Dominican Republic, that was our furthest south and our first, quote, foreign, well, let's just say third world country. Back to the Bahamas again, back to Fort Lauderdale, across the Atlantic with the Nordhavn Atlantic Rally. From Gibraltar, we went to the Balearic Islands. We spent the summer in the Balearic Islands and the eastern coast of Spain. Spent the winter in Barcelona. The following spring, it was off to Calvi at the top of Corsica, around the west coast of Corsica to Bonifacio, to the islands south of there, to Sardinia, across to Rome, took a trip 3 days to Venice, back to Rome, back to the offshore Italian islands, down to Sicily, to Syracuse, to Malta, back to Syracuse, over to Greece, to the Aeolian Greek islands, through the Corinth Canal, to the magical Greek Aegean islands, spent the winter in Marmaris, Turkey. From Marmaris through the western Greek islands to Crete, back to Syracuse, back to the offshore islands off Italy, back to Rome, to the Italian Riviera, French Riviera, back to Barcelona, to Gibraltar, to the Canary Islands, to Brazil, to Argentina, to Ushuaia, Cape Horn, up the Chilean channels to Puerto Montt, Chile at the top of the channels, offshore to Chilean town of Talcahuano, which was just devastated in a recent tsunami. Juan de Fernandez Islands, Easter Island, Pitcairn Island, Gambier Islands, 1,000 miles north to Tahiti, through the French Polynesian Islands, to American Samoa, Soro Atoll, Kingdom of Tonga, New Zealand, Tasmania, Australian mainland, south across, or west across the south of the Australian continent, to Fremantle, Perth, from there to Mauritius and the Indian Ocean off Madagascar, overnight to Reunion, to Richards Bay, South Africa, on South Africa's east coast, around Cape of Good Hope to Cape Town, from Cape Town up to Walvis Bay, Namibia, to Ascension Island in the middle of the South Atlantic, to St. Helena Island in the middle of the South Atlantic, to Ascension Island, about 700 miles south of the equator, to the Canary Islands, which is where we are today.
It seems like here we've talked about how far we've gone, and we had gone a lot of miles, a lot of sea miles, and we've had some weather. We have very good weather routing, and we don't take chances with weather, but if you're out there long enough, you're going to run into weather. And the Nordhavn can handle anything. It's not the boat, it's really the cruiser that has to come up to the level of the boat, because the Nordhavn would just take us anywhere we want to go.
The systems on a boat are very, very well done. And for you guys out there that are somewhat technical, I can look you in the eye and tell you that in about 10 years of ownership, we haven't changed a single wire or wire terminal that Nordhavn installed from the factory. And that's saying something. It typically isn't the big stuff that goes bad, it's the small stuff. And in maintenance, until we got to Italy, I'd done all the maintenance myself, or between Mary and I, or Mary helping. And in Italy, we paid exactly 1 hour's labor. I managed to back over the dinghy painter and wrap it around the prop. And we ran on the wing engine to a small yard that could haul us. It was about 25 miles away. And I paid 1 hour's labor to have it. It just turns out it was the flax packing that seized the shaft. And we've probably spent, and this may sound crazy, but because I do my own work, and I'm not a mechanic incidentally, it was not my background at all, I'd say perhaps $1,000 a year above and beyond routine maintenance if you average it out. So it's not what you think. If you can't do anything and you just write checks, then it's a different story. But if you're willing to take the time to learn or have someone help you, and as cruisers, we all have spare time. So in fact, we carry very extensive spares, but I'd say the far majority of our spares have been to help other people, not necessarily ourselves. So the mechanical end of it is really pretty simple. We've replaced perhaps 4 or 5 water pumps, freshwater pumps. It's just 2 wires and 2 hoses. I mean, it's not real difficult. And the big stuff, like the main engine, when we leave the Canary Islands here pretty quick, about a month and a half, we'll be gone up to Gibraltar, then back into the Mediterranean. On that trip, the engine will pass 10,000 hours. And we change the injectors after 7,000 hours. And after that, we have done virtually nothing to the engine other than change the oil. Change the antifreeze every couple of years, and change filters. So truly the fuel system on these boats are just killer, and it's the fuel that stops you. It's not big parts breaking, it just doesn't happen anymore. The engines are just that good today. In fact, the modern engines with their injection and so forth is even better than what we have. They're more efficient. And so it's the little things that go, and it's where people just don't pay attention. They don't clean their fuel tanks or this or that, but if you do just the basic maintenance, I mean, these things will just go virtually forever. We have never, ever even considered that the boat's going to fail. Fairly recently, we left Fremantle, Australia for Mauritius in the Indian Ocean, and the overall passage was 3,365 miles. And we got an email from 2-time circumnavigators who, they've done really a lot of stuff, and a lot of high latitude stuff.
Sailboats, yeah.
And yeah, sailboaters. And they said how brave we must be. And, you know, we're not brave. We're just used to it. And for us, it would be much more difficult to do it under sail than under power. Because essentially, once we made the turn left, we put in 1 waypoint, and 24 days later when the alarm went off, we were within 10 miles of the island. And it was not any more difficult than that. And in that whole trip, we had about a day and a half of bouncing, let's call it. And the rest of the time, we hardly had spray on the glass. And we just choose the time of year to go. We watch the weather very closely, and then we go. But if we do get weather, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter because we're uncomfortable, but nothing's going to happen to the boat. A lot of people are concerned about safety, so we should talk about it. It's quite safe to be on a boat today. The electronics we have today are just amazing. First of all, GPS allowed many of us to go to sea. Communication is another thing. We have an Iridium phone, so any place in the world, any time of the day, 24 hours a day, we can pick up the phone and call anyone we wish. We have email capability aboard. The autopilot drives the boat. We don't steer the boat. In fact, we don't even have a helm chair. You can literally put in a waypoint, and 1,000 miles later, when the alarm goes off, you're there. And it's kind of that simple. The charting today is very, very accurate. There's some places it's not as accurate. However, by the time you get there, you'll know exactly, it'll just make sense to you because you coordinate everything with your radar, with your depth finder, and your plotter. And it's quite easy, actually. And if I had never gone to sea and were listening to this, I'd sort of shake my head and say, yeah, right. But truly it is. And you have to understand, I was 50 years old before I turned on my first computer. So if I can do it, there's a person listening to this that can't do it. Another innovation to come along relatively not too far in the past was AIS. And all the ships today have it. It's an automatic identification system. So we have it set at 12 miles. And any target within 25 minutes and a 4-mile approach. So when that alarm goes off, the most important line on that instrument is your CPA, which is closest point of approach. And it doesn't lie. The large ships today are driven by insurance companies. They're told what to do, and they don't even call you anymore and ask you if you'll move. They just move. We had a freighter, not a freighter, a tanker, over 1,000 feet long, at 3 miles, turn, and it turned surprisingly fast. And they just moved. They moved out of our way, and they had the right of way. And we were preparing to move, and anytime we do move, we make a drastic change, so there's no question what we've done. Of course, they're following us on radar as well. So if you did a circumnavigation or a major crossing or even coastal cruising in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, that was very, very different, even early 90s, than what we have today. And today it is just so much better than what we had in the past.